Hi everyone, welcome to our December edition of Tandem's Interviews with Children's Book Authors. Today I'm sitting here with Breanna McDaniel, the author of Hands Up, which is one of our super favorite additions to our school collection this year. And so Bree is here all the way from DC to visit, and we're so excited that she was able to join us here in beautiful, foggy Oakland. And let's start with the beginning. How did you start becoming a creative? When did that start for you, and how?
So I don't know that I ever saw myself as a creative, but I've always written stories. I was going through some of my old writings from when I was younger, and there was a story that I had written and submitted for a contest, and I won third place. And it was called Night of the Living Hydra. I was really into Greek and Roman mythology.
Oh, wow.
And so it's about this little girl who had gone to visit ancient Greece and ended up saving everybody because a hydra emerged from the depths of wherever. And I was like, oh, baby Bree was pretty on point.
Wow, that's so cool. And you didn't remember anything about having written that?
No. It's just you pull that stuff back once you do it.
Yeah. How old were you when you wrote that?
I think that was third grade. But I've always been a really connected reader. I've loved reading ever since I started reading, and I was very young. My grandmother taught me how to read, and then she was just kind of go forth, you're welcome. And I was like, thank you, this gift. But then, so I guess I've always been creative too, because I used to write children's stories to tell at church. They would have a little piece of the program that was set aside for the children to come and kind of teach object lessons. And I started again telling those stories very early, around 8th grade as well.
Oh, wow.
But I always kind of saw myself as first I wanted to be a race car driver, then I wanted to be an archaeologist, then I wanted to be an attorney. I don't think writing books, telling stories in this way ever kind of connected with me.
As a career.
Uh-huh. I mean, I guess I did improv for a while, and I did theater, and I loved theater. I loved it. But I don't know that I ever really saw those paths that I was taking that I had as creative, spaces. They just, I don't know, were extensions of my love for a lot of different things, I guess.
Yeah. So how did you make that leap from being such an avid reader with the support of your grandmother to then wanting to create your own stories? Do you remember how that turn happened?
Yeah, so I know exactly what happened. I graduated from alma mater, Emory University, in 2011, and I started working at Emory in residence life. I've been working in residence life for a long time, and I love student affairs. So I was like, it's pretty great. I could do this forever. And I went back to talk to one of my professors, Dr. Nagyalti Warren at Emory, when she's retired now. And I said, I really like this. And she was like, okay, so what are you thinking about for next year? I said, I think I'm just going to take a job and I'm going to stay here at Emory. And she was like, oh, okay. Have you considered graduate school? And I said, no, I think I'm happy to stay here. She said, oh, okay. Have you considered graduate school? I was like, oh, you are telling me that. And so then she moved me into a space where I started really considering what I was excited about. And I did. I came back upon some of my old stories that I had written for that church time. And I thought, well, maybe this is something that would be interesting. And she is a poet. I'm not a poet. She is a poet. She's very talented. And I brought them to her, and she said, well, maybe there's a graduate program that is for you that's connected to that. And it was Simmons University. So I went in there, and I started, and in the MFA program, and then I took a critical analysis course with Megan Lambert, who is an incredible author as well as an incredible lecturer and teacher and scholar. And I was like, oh, I really like digging deep into children's literature, seeing the layers and like looking for meaning. And so I switched. And that was in 2014, and I didn't think I would ever go back to writing. Obviously I did.
Yeah, obviously you did. But not without a lot of critical analysis and layers. And it's really interesting, I think, that intersection of your academic background with children's books and then the creative side of it and creating your own from scratch. And I'm interested in how you landed with this book in particular, the themes in Hands Up, and how much of that you attribute to your own upbringing and life, and how much of it came from a sort of critical and academic perspective of what you think needs to be out there in the world.
That's such a good question. Ooh,
Thank you.
You. Really good. So firstly, when I wrote that book, when I started writing Hands Up, it was in 2014. The joy, which I think is a theme in the book, the idea of a necessary resilience that Black children in particular have to have, like they have to bounce back, which for me does not always feel fair, but you know, I think it's a part of how they exist here in the United States, in particular, talking about African American children and thinking broadly as well, diasporically. But I thought to myself, like, how could I write about that in 2014? Because I was really reflecting on what was happening in Ferguson when I started writing this. I wrote the first full draft in one day, and it was not short like it is now. It was very long, and it did not end with any joy or resilience. And so I sent it to a friend who I met at Simmons, and I was like, what do you think about this? And she was like, I don't think this can be published ever. She was like, you have no hope in it. And I was like, yeah.
Not feeling particularly hopeful.
Yep. So I don't know what to do. Or maybe what I did was, I think I might have sent it into a contest and then responded that no, it wouldn't be accepted. So then I sent it to my friend and said, like, what did I do wrong? So once it did get into the hands of Dana, my eventual editor, what we both had to do, and I think a lot of people don't think about this, is in order to pull out exactly what you want to say with the few words that you have, you can't just kind of write anything. You have to think carefully about what you're writing, because every word counts. So even though there are a lot of things that are coming from my experience, you know, Burdett Gym, which was a haven space, a library, Burdett Gym in Atlanta, Georgia, which was a haven space, College Park Gym in Georgia, the library, church at one point was a haven space for me. That all shows up here in the book. And so, yes, I was reflecting a lot of my personal experiences from when I was growing up. But in order for me and Dana to be on the same page with making sure that the words that we ended up with held the meaning and the movement that we wanted, we were sharing articles back and forth. We cried together because it was, you know, the things that I was reflecting on in 2014 have never stopped. So it's a constant grief. It's a constant reflection. And she, you know, was definitely of the mindset that there has to be a joy present in this as well. Yeah. And getting to that without being didactic was difficult. And, you know, I'm using all of this language. That's the critical analysis.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
So,
yeah, I'm wanting, for folks who haven't had the pleasure of seeing this book, I feel like it's a moment where people need to get a sense of what we're talking about in terms of balancing these words, this phrase of hands up, that especially in contemporary society can bring up a lot of real negativity and fear and anger and frustration, and how it gets converted into something joyful. And actually, I think one of my favorite parts is the bike ride. And the book consists of a few different little narratives where you have a beginning, middle, and end. And she's racing and she's excited and her hands are up.
Yeah.
And then she falls down, and in order to get help, her hands are up. And so I'm really interested in that process for you, and especially where the book started and how it arrived at this point, infusing that joy. You've talked about why that joy was so important, but what was it that allowed you to find these joyful moments and make those connections between the joy and the negativity?
My nieces and my nephews. You know, it's very hard not to, you know, at the time when I was writing it, doing the first couple of drafts, I was not in Atlanta, which is where my family is from, and where my nieces and my nephews are based. And when I kept getting notes about hope coming back to me, I just, you know, the world that I was seeing, the world that they were going to be entering into as future leaders, what was this world? What was the gift for them? The gift, you know, where was the love going to be? The gift of life, like, it didn't seem like a gift. So then going home and talking to them and going out and still seeing that, like, they have a very keen awareness of all the stuff that was happening in 2014, all the stuff that's still been happening. Their mom talks to them, their dad talks to them. I have nephews that are, you know, constantly having conversations with people in and out of communities. My nieces and my, the little itty bitty ones have questions all the time. So these conversations were being built out with them, and they, I don't know, they had this awareness, but still were like, are we going to the movies? Are we going to go to the carnival?
Yeah.
Are we just, you know, like, what are we going to do, auntie? So it wasn't just, I don't think it was hopelessness, just hopelessness. I think it was also a fear that they showed me that there was life and movement and this resilience that they had. I wanted to find a way to put that in. And I think we were able to do that with how we built out the story and the words. Then Shane came in with these illustrations, and there was a brightness and like that color palette.
Feature some of those.
Yeah.
Shane Evans is the illustrator of this book. Yeah, it's really gorgeous.
The textures, like there's a joyfulness and the playfulness that exists even in like these minor characters that come out. This cat, which, you know.
Did you ever envision the cat when you were writing the story?
I was like, the cat is awesome.
Speaking of joy.
And like in the back of the book, in the author's note, I talk about frustration, I talk about sadness, I talk about fear. And this is a reflection on how those have existed directly connected to this action. And I've heard some people say, this is me reclaiming Hands Up, Don't Shoot. And I will never take away from someone's interpretation if that's what they're feeling and saying. But that was already reclaimed and became a call to action long before I wrote this book. So this is a reflection on it in connection to resilience and joy and like slice of life, you know, just living. This is the mattering of Black lives in a book. So
the life part.
This is a life.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Thanks.
So I want to go back to something you touched on when you were talking about your nieces and nephews. And the and first of all, their keen awareness, which is another thing you touch on in your author's note, that kids notice a lot more than we give them credit for.
Yeah, they do.
And then the conversations they've been having with their parents about it. And I'm curious how you see this book in terms of a tool for parents and families, what kinds of conversations do you see it sparking or facilitating? Have you thought of it with that lens?
I did not, and then I did a program with an organization called Embrace Race, which is based in Amherst, Massachusetts. And it's funny because I started out the conversation, I did a read aloud with some of the kids that are in that community. And I said, what do you all think of when you hear hands up? And, you know, there were a variety of responses. And then one child said, I think of a little girl who's jumping, and there's a sun, and her hands are. And I was like, this is awesome. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, this is great. We could just talk about this, you know, all right. Nobody said hands up, don't shoot. And then at the end of me reading, you know, we opened it up for questions, and a young woman said, how come you don't have police officers in your book?
How young of a woman?
I think she was about 7. And I said, and I looked over at the folks who were from Embrace Race, and I was like, you know what I say? Like, be honest.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I told the truth. In the very first iteration of the book, there was police officers, and it didn't end. It didn't end well. And I said, because of the grief, the ongoing kind of communal mourning that I'm a part of, with everything that I continue to see in this, you know, in the U.S. I didn't say it like this to her, but I said it like that, or that's what I'm saying. I didn't, and I don't know that I have the range to include larger parts of the community that we exist in, and the interactions that are often happening with people in the community, like police officers, and still have joy be present in the book. She was like, And so when I think about this as a tool, it's, you open up the pages and you ask the kids what they see and what they think, and take the time to read the author's note and to read the illustrator's note and talk through it. And you could, you know, maybe push specific conversations, but that wasn't me pushing a conversation. It was me going through the entire book, sharing it, and then giving kids time to reflect on things and watching their brains churn as they started to think about, I have heard these words before, and they get to the end with the protest scene, and they know that protests are for a lot of different things: climate change, immigration, inequities, Black Lives Matter. Like, the movement is there.
Yeah, and I think that story is a really good specific reflection of exactly what you were talking about in your author's note, and we mentioned, where kids do see, and they will make the connection, and they will bring it up. And a lot of these conversations that we don't know how to start, books can be the beginning and give the child, like you were saying, I love the way you talked about the wheels turning, because I see that so often, you know, when you're talking to kids. If you just give them enough content to think about, then they'll come up with some pretty interesting conversation topics of their own, and they'll kind of guide you in a way. So that's a beautiful story. I love that. Yeah.
I think one of the most favorite things that's ever happened to me is when I met one of my mentors, Dr. Michelle Martin, for the first time. It was on Skype, and here I am in my mind, this graduate student who has nothing to offer. Please let me come sit at your feet. And we're talking, and she said, you know, I'm really excited about your project. I'm really excited about the work that you're doing, and I'm so excited to learn from you. And what an opportunity for me. And I was like, and I thought about how we often position ourselves and position other people as these vessels of knowledge. And man, kids carry so much wisdom, and we'll lose out. We'll often lose out so much. And so if we take the time to understand that we can learn from those vessels, that they have a fullness and they're critical, you know, I think we take a lot more to be able to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm getting back to my script here, trying to see what we didn't just cover. I think we covered a lot of it. What for you translates all of this, all of the theory, all of the life experience and art and the writing and the illustration, all these pieces that come together and can make a scientifically perfect book, but how does that translate into being a book that's really engaging and powerful for a child? What's your experience of that?
Yeah, I don't, man, kids, like actual kids bring together. So one of my favorite books to read aloud is Please, Baby, Please.
Oh, yeah.
And so the kids were asking me today, I just finished a school visit at Fruitvale, and they asked me, like, you know, what do you like to read? And I was like, oh, man, what? And then I was like, I really like Please, Baby, Please. And so then the librarian was like, I have a copy of that. It's a great book. I was like, can I read it out loud? And they were laughing, and like I wanted them to laugh more. I wanted them to enjoy the experience of being read to aloud. So I camped it up a little bit, moved it over a little bit more. Are you all ready for the next page turn? This is a good one. And you know, doing the movement, but when a book gives you space to participate in it that way, when it's an exchange and when it's a movement and when it's a connection and there's space for that, then it feels really good. And I think that all comes together with what words and what text and images, when they come together, what they can do. I mean, we know that, you know, a book's page turns are important. And so when you're editing it, that's what you're thinking about. You're thinking about what it'll sound like and how it'll feel, what that rhythm is as you move throughout the book. And so, I mean, you can bring in then expectations from that point. But where is the space for you to live the story and breathe the story and build it and communicate with it? You know?
Yeah.
And that's all.
I do.
Yeah.
That's everything. Yeah. That's everything that we're about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing you talk about both the way that it's delivered, when you were reading Please, Baby, Please, and you said camping it up and like creating that interaction, but also that it's built into the structure of where the words are on the page. So it's both in the tool itself and then in the way you use the tool.
Beautiful. Thank you for taking my meandering and bringing it into
Thank you for meandering. Yeah, because I think that is so true, the connection between the two things. So what about, you talked earlier about some of the mentors in your life, both at Emory and previously in your family. What about young kids who are thinking about writing as a career, or are thinking about archaeology and law as careers, and then maybe they also like to write? What do you have any words for the kiddos who are interested in becoming storytellers?
Sure. What I would say is, you know, be connected. Be connected, not like with a lot of, you know, folks in business that you can, but be connected to who you are. If that means being connected to your community, being connected to your family, being connected to, or maybe not connected is is the wrong word, grounded. Because, you know, a lot of this work can be solitary. Should I be real? Or like, am I supposed to be
Please be real.
Okay. I was like, oh man, this is, And I was like, maybe I should just give like a little, you think about it, what you could do.
We'll take the joy with the real. What's your specialty?
Just, you know, the honest truth is it's very solitary work oftentimes.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to come in and out of the worlds and the spaces that you're going to create. And, you know, my dog keeps me grounded in the space because I can't just write. I used to just write. And she's like, hey, just wanted to check in because it is exactly 6 o'clock. It's time for me to eat, so I don't know what you want to do, but I feel like you should feed me first. Yep. Yeah, she's actually meaner than that, but she gets nippy.
You're her anchor translator.
Yeah. But like she's an anchor, my best friend, who is like way too honest with me about who I am and like, you know, my earnestness and all the other things. She grounds me because she gets, you know, she's the person who reflects back to me so many different things, and I get to see perspective from a lot of different ways. That helped me with my writing. So because this can be solitary work, finding those anchors in other spaces, I think is going to be important. I think that being a good writer means being a good reader. And so that doesn't mean that that means what you're interested in, read, build, grow. I'm not putting an idea that like you have to read these things that are classics or not classics. Just see what's out there that you want to be interested in and how stories are told, and then that's how you start to build out what your style is going to be and how your stories are going to be shared out with the world. So anchors and exploring stories, maybe not just reading, but exploring stories and the way stories are told.
Nice. I like that a lot.
Oh, thanks. Ha! Finally got back around to it. I meander. Sorry.
So do we have any, I haven't checked so we don't have any additional questions coming in right now. Do you have anything else that you want to bring up that we haven't talked about yet?
Oh, I think so.
Okay, well then I'm going to wrap it up with our very last question, which we ask in every interview.
Okay.
And we're always very excited to find out.
Great.
What is your favorite children's book?
So my favorite so right now, can I just say that
that's always how my answer starts.
Yeah.
Right now. Yeah.
Right now, it is Going Down Home with Daddy. And that is Kelly Starling Lyon. And Daniel Minter is the illustrator. And it is a beautiful, gorgeous book. And there are so many layers to it. And you can just spend time just looking at the illustrations, or you could just spend time like cozying up with Kelly's words and just kind of bringing them close and breathing them in just a little bit. Like you can just, I love a book that you can just take a second with and feel renewed and connected as you continue to just settle into it, spend that time with it. But my all-time favorite book is The People Could Fly by Virginia Hamilton. I love that book, that anthology, and some of those stories are terrifying, and some of them are just like scary because they're like spirits and haunts and stuff. And some of it is scary because, you know, it's a connectedness to a past that is sordid and ugly and still present. And it's scary because some people will act like it never existed. And it's there. It's in your face. And Virginia Hamilton she's the real deal. So
that groundedness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much
Yes.
For sharing with us today, for coming all the way out here.
Sure.
And if you haven't checked it out yet, take a look at Hands Up at your local library or bookstore.
Yeah.
And I want to finish before we sign off by just letting you know that we are well into December, which is our big end of year giving season. And so if you would like to support our ability to buy thousands and thousands of Bree's book, and keep our programming going to engage young children in these fantastic children's books, please take a look at the link in the comment section. Thank you so much.